Power, influence, untouchable wealth. Sean Diddy Combs was more than a music mogul. He was a force, a man who didn't just follow trends but created them. He built an empire that extended far beyond hip-hop, shaping the culture, defining generations, and cementing his status among the world's elite. For decades, he stood at the pinnacle of success. His record label, his fashion ventures, his vodka brand, each move seemed effortless, another triumph in a long line of victories. His lifestyle was the epitome of luxury. Private jets, celebrity parties, the biggest names in entertainment, all vying for a place in his orbit. Cameras captured the spectacle, the glamorous events, the platinum records, the extravagant celebrations. But now those cameras are focused on something else, something that was never meant to be seen. Federal agents swarming his mansions, a growing list of lawsuits, allegations too serious to be ignored. And at the center of it all, a man who once seemed untouchable, now facing the weight of accusations that stretch back decades. Sex trafficking, assault, abuse. A pattern that, according to multiple victims, wasn't an isolated incident, but a hidden reality masked by power, fame, and fear. For years, whispers surrounded Diddy, stories that never made headlines, accounts that were buried under NDAs and settlements. But now, the voices are growing louder. High-profile names stepping forward, lawsuits piling up, investigations widening. This isn't just another scandal. This isn't tabloid gossip. This is a story that threatens to unravel everything. His empire, his legacy, his freedom. Tonight, we follow the rise and fall of Sean Diddy Combs. From his early beginnings to the peak of his career, from whispers in the industry to full-scale criminal investigations, what really happened behind the closed doors of his empire? And who is finally ready to tell the truth? This is the story of power, control, and the truth that refuses to stay hidden. Before the allegations, before the lawsuits, before the federal agents at his doorstep, there was just a young man with ambition. Sean John Combs was born in Harlem, New York on November 4th, 1969, but his childhood was anything but glamorous. Raised in Mount Vernon by his mother Janice, a teacher's assistant, and his father Melvin, a former U.S. Air Force officer, young Sean's life took a tragic turn early. His father was murdered in 1972 when Sean was just 2 years old. A drug dealer with alleged ties to the notorious Frank Lucas organization, Melvin Combs was gunned down in Central Park. It was a violent end, one that left a lasting mark on his son. In interviews, Diddy would later claim he never knew the full story of his father's death. But one thing was clear: growing up without him fueled his hunger for success. By the time he reached college, Combs was already showing signs of the relentless drive that would define his career. He attended Howard University, but left before graduating, drawn to the fast-paced world of music. He landed an internship at Uptown Records, working under Andre Harrell, and it didn't take long for the young intern to make his presence known. Sean Combs had an ear for talent. He had a vision, and he wasn't afraid to take risks. In the early 1990s, Uptown Records gave Combs a shot at developing artists, but his aggressive, take-no-prisoners approach clashed with the company's leadership. By 1993, he was fired. It could have been the end of his career. Instead, it was the beginning of an empire. Determined to prove himself, Combs launched Bad Boy Records that same year, and in 1994, he made a move that would change hip-hop forever. He signed Christopher Wallace, better known as the Notorious B.I.G. Biggie's debut album, Ready to Die, became an instant classic. His deep, commanding voice, vivid storytelling, and gritty New York authenticity made him a superstar. With Combs guiding his career, Bad Boy Records exploded onto the scene, delivering hit after hit. It wasn't just Biggie. Maze, Faith Evans, Total, 112, Bad Boy's roster was a powerhouse. Combs had the golden touch. By the mid-90s, he wasn't just a producer, he was a star in his own right. His flashy suits, signature ad-libs, and over-the-top persona made him larger than life. He didn't just want to work behind the scenes, he wanted the spotlight. Then in 1997, the world of hip-hop was shaken to its core. On March 9, 1997, the Notorious B.I.G. was gunned down in Los Angeles. His murder, following the death of Tupac Shakur just 6 months earlier, marked the height of the infamous East Coast versus West Coast rivalry. And while the world mourned, questions began to arise. What role did Bad Boy Records play in the feud, and how much did Diddy know? Some saw Combs as a grieving friend and mentor. Others whispered about tensions behind the scenes. Did Diddy's ambitions put Biggie in danger? Did the bad boy empire benefit from the chaos? The murder remains unsolved to this day, and though there has never been concrete evidence linking Combs to Biggie's death, the tragedy marked a turning point in his career. With his star artist gone, Diddy pivoted. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Combs rebranded himself. No longer just a producer, he was now a fashion mogul, a media tycoon, and a brand mastermind. Sean John, his fashion line took over the industry, becoming one of the biggest urban brands of the era. Ciroc Vodka. Diddy didn't just endorse Ciroc, he made it a lifestyle, a symbol of high-end luxury. Revolt TV, a media company aimed at giving hip-hop culture a voice. He was no longer just about music, he was about power, influence, and control. But behind the glitz and glamour, cracks were forming. As Diddy's empire grew, so did the whispers of misconduct. One of the first major scandals erupted in 1999. At Club New York in Manhattan, a night meant for celebration turned into chaos. A fight broke out. Gunshots rang through the club. 3 people were injured. Diddy, his then-girlfriend Jennifer Lopez, and his protege Jamal "Shine" Barrow were arrested. Diddy faced charges of bribery and illegal gun possession. Prosecutors claimed he offered his driver $50,000 to take the fall. After a high-profile trial, he was acquitted of all charges. Shine wasn't so lucky. He took the fall and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. The case was a glimpse into something larger, a pattern. Wherever Diddy went, controversy followed. Mistreatment of artists and business disputes. Over the years, multiple artists accused him of manipulative contracts, unpaid royalties, and controlling behavior. Maze, one of Bad Boy's biggest stars, publicly accused Combs of blocking his music and profiting off his early work. The Locks fought for years to regain control of their masters, famously calling out Diddy on the radio for his exploitative contracts. Danity Kane, a girl group formed under Diddy's guidance, alleged mistreatment and financial disputes. Many artists who started under Diddy found themselves broke, frustrated, and locked into contracts they couldn't escape. Some chalked it up to the harsh realities of the music business. Others believed there was something deeper at play, a pattern of control that went far beyond business. And then in 2023, the accusations took a turn no one expected. Women and men began coming forward. Allegations that had been buried for years were finally being exposed. Stories of abuse, coercion, and fear. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs built an empire, but now, for the first time, the foundation was beginning to crack. And what lay beneath? The truth was finally starting to surface. For years, Sean Diddy Combs stood at the center of the entertainment world, a man with immense power, connections, and wealth. To the public, he was a mogul, a trendsetter, an icon. But within the industry, behind closed doors, another story was taking shape. Rumors swirled, stories that weren't printed in magazines, whispers that never made it to primetime interviews. Former employees, associates, artists who once stood beside him. Some described a work environment fueled by fear and manipulation. Others recalled moments that didn't sit right, parties that took strange turns, encounters that felt staged, power plays that went beyond business. For decades, these stories stayed buried. Some dismissed them as exaggerated tales of the music industry's darker side. Others believed them. But who would dare accuse one of the most powerful men in entertainment? Then came the lawsuits. When Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit in November 2023, the entertainment world was stunned. The R&B singer, once seen as Diddy's protege and longtime girlfriend, shattered years of silence, detailing a relationship marked by abuse, coercion, and violence. In the lawsuit, Cassie alleged that Diddy had physically beaten her, sexually assaulted her, and forced her into violent sexual encounters with male prostitutes while he recorded the acts. She described being trapped in a cycle of control and fear. She spoke of nights where she was beaten unconscious, dragged through hotel hallways, and threatened whenever she tried to leave. Cassie's lawsuit was shocking, but it wasn't the first. Years before her case, others had come forward, some as far back as the early 1990s. Liza Gardner, 1990. A young woman who claimed that in the early years of Diddy's career, he and singer Aaron Hall sexually assaulted her and a friend. Joy Dickerson Neal, 1991. another early accuser who alleged she was drugged and assaulted by Diddy, only to later find out that a video of the act had been distributed without her consent. Crystal McKinney, 2003, a woman who, in 2024, filed a lawsuit against Diddy, accusing him of sexual assault in an incident that had remained buried for over 2 decades. But it wasn't just women. One of the most disturbing lawsuits came from a man named Rodney Jones, a former music producer who worked closely with Diddy from 2022 to 2023. Jones described being invited into Diddy's inner circle, promised opportunities, promised wealth. But behind the luxury was something far more unsettling. In his lawsuit, he alleged that Diddy drugged him and sexually assaulted him multiple times. He claimed that others in the industry knew, that some had been paid to stay silent, that others had simply looked away. These cases weren't random, they weren't isolated. They formed a pattern. For years, whenever whispers of misconduct surfaced, Diddy's legal team moved swiftly. NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, were signed, settlements were reached, accusers vanished from the public eye. Some lawsuits never made it to court. They were quietly settled, tucked away, hidden beneath contracts and legal agreements. And for years it worked. Even Cassie's case, one of the most damning lawsuits filed against him, was settled within just 24 hours. But why so fast? To some, it was an admission of guilt. Why settle if the allegations weren't true? Why move so quickly if there was nothing to hide? To others, it was just another example of how the powerful avoid consequences. But something had changed. Cassie's lawsuit wasn't just another accusation. It was a catalyst. It opened the floodgates. More victims began to speak out. More lawsuits followed. The allegations became impossible to ignore. And then the federal government stepped in. This was no longer about tabloid headlines or civil lawsuits. Now the FBI and Homeland Security were involved. Now, Diddy wasn't just facing lawsuits. He was facing federal charges. For years, allegations followed Sean Diddy Combs. But in 2024, the accusations reached a level no one could ignore. The government had taken notice, and what they uncovered was more than anyone expected. The story that had started as whispers in the industry had now evolved into an intricate web of federal investigations and high-profile legal battles. Diddy, once seen as a towering figure in hip-hop and business, was now facing accusations that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The allegations were staggering: sex trafficking on a massive scale, a web of abuse, manipulation, and coercion that stretched across decades. Federal authorities had jumped into the investigation with full force, and what they were uncovering sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. The FBI and Homeland Security launched a full-scale investigation into Diddy's activities. What began as individual lawsuits had now ballooned into a federal case involving sex trafficking, exploitation, and systemic abuse. The government was looking not just at isolated incidents of abuse, but at a potential criminal enterprise with Diddy at the center. Investigators issued search warrants for properties linked to Diddy in Miami and Los Angeles. These were not mere formality requests. They were critical moves designed to uncover evidence that could link Diddy to illegal trafficking activities. Inside his sprawling estates, authorities sought financial records, email communications, and documentation that could point to a wider operation of manipulation and control. At the Miami estate, a search warrant led agents to secret rooms, luxury apartments, and hidden basements, some of which were only used for private parties, the kinds of gatherings Diddy was known for hosting, and which many survivors would later describe as hubs of trafficking and exploitation. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, investigators combed through the mansion's security footage, focusing on late-night gatherings, where women were seen arriving at the estate under the cover of darkness and never leaving until the next morning. More victims come forward. With every search warrant and every subpoena, the floodgates of truth began to break open. The victims were no longer just names in legal documents. They were real people, each with a personal story of manipulation, abuse, and betrayal. One of the most shocking testimonies to emerge came from Jane Doe, a woman who only identified herself as a victim due to ongoing threats to her safety. Jane's story began when she was 16. She described how she was introduced to Diddy by one of his associates at a nightclub in New York. Initially promised a career in music, she quickly learned that she was nothing more than a pawn in Diddy's world of exploitation. In chilling detail, Jane Doe recounted being trafficked across several cities. She was told she would be a part of Diddy's exclusive entourage, but once she arrived at a lavish hotel in Miami, the reality became horrifying. Jane claimed she was gang-raped by Diddy and several of his associates in a room that was pre-arranged for this purpose. She also alleged that the assault was filmed and that she was threatened with the release of the video if she spoke out or tried to leave. Her testimony was a game-changer in the case, as it provided concrete allegations of trafficking and coercion that went far beyond what had been originally suspected. Jane's story also mirrored several other testimonies that painted Diddy's actions as systematic and deliberate. By 2024, the number of victims continued to grow. Among the most prominent voices was Dawn Richard, a former member of the popular group Danity Kane. Dawn's decision to come forward after years of silence was significant, as it exposed the toxic environment surrounding Diddy's treatment of his artists. Dawn claimed that she had been sexually assaulted by Diddy multiple times during her time in Danity Kane, but the abuse didn't stop there. She alleged that after she rejected Diddy's advances, she was locked in a hotel room for several days without the ability to leave. There, she was repeatedly assaulted and denied access to her phone or any means of contact with the outside world. Her testimony, along with those of other women, painted a picture of an environment where Diddy's influence was used to isolate and control those under his power. Thalia Graves, whose story dated back to 2001, described how she had been invited to one of Diddy's infamous parties, where she was introduced to him by one of his trusted associates. Thalia claims that after she arrived, she was drugged and bound, and then raped by Diddy and several other men in a private room. What made this incident even more disturbing was Thalia's account of how the entire assault was filmed and circulated within Diddy's circle of friends. She was terrified into silence for years, unable to come forward because of the threat of the video being shared publicly. But as the years went on, the emotional and psychological toll of the abuse became too much for her to bear, and Thalia filed a lawsuit in 2024 seeking justice for what happened to her. Another victim, April Lampros, filed a lawsuit against Diddy, claiming that she had been sexually abused repeatedly from 1994 to the early 2000s. According to her, Diddy had used his status as a powerful figure in the entertainment industry to manipulate her into sex acts over several years. April described how she would be invited to private meetings and events where Diddy would promise her a successful career. But the reality was that each of these invitations came with strings attached, strings that included sexual coercion and manipulation. In one of the most shocking revelations of the case, Derek Lee Cardello Smith, a man who had attended one of Diddy's infamous parties in 1997, also stepped forward to share his experience. Derek described being sexually assaulted by Diddy in the midst of a lavish event, surrounded by a group of people, many of whom were complicit in the attack. Derek's story provided another layer of complexity to the case, showing that Diddy's abuse was not limited to women, but extended to anyone in his orbit. With so many victims coming forward, Tony Busby, one of the most high-profile attorneys in the country, became the representative for over 120 victims, including 25 minors. Busby, known for handling some of the most high-profile sexual abuse cases in the entertainment world, was quick to take on the case, calling Diddy's alleged actions a criminal enterprise that spanned decades. As Busby's team took on more victims, they uncovered shocking new evidence. Some of the victims, including former staff members, had come forward with crucial information about Diddy's business practices and his manipulation of women. Busby began to dig into financial records, uncovering large sums of money that appeared to be funneled into shell companies, some of which were linked to human trafficking networks. Surveillance footage from private parties showed women being brought into Diddy's homes with little regard for their safety or consent. As the investigation progressed, authorities had a growing list of potential witnesses, former employees, security personnel, and even contractors who had worked at Diddy's properties over the years. Many of them described a culture of fear within Diddy's team, where any attempt to question his behavior was met with retaliation and intimidation. There were reports of witnesses being paid off or silenced through threats. Yet as more victims came forward, some former employees felt a sense of duty to speak out, willing to risk their own safety in order to expose the truth. The federal investigation and the mounting lawsuits were pushing the case into uncharted territory. It was clear now. What had begun as a whisper of scandal was rapidly becoming a multifaceted investigation into one of the most powerful figures in entertainment history. As the legal pressure on Diddy intensified, questions remained. How many more victims were out there? Could the evidence tie him directly to organized sex trafficking? And most importantly, how far would Diddy's empire crumble under the weight of these charges? For decades, the entertainment industry has operated under a veil of secrecy, a culture that shelters the most powerful individuals while silencing those who would speak out. It's a world where whispers of abuse, misconduct, and even criminal activity often remain hidden behind the glossy images of fame and fortune. When allegations surfaced about Sean Diddy Combs, it became clear that this was not an isolated case. In fact, Diddy's situation mirrored the experiences of many other high-profile figures who were able to maintain their dominance over the years through a combination of power, money, and fear. The culture of silence in Hollywood and the music industry has long been criticized for protecting men like Diddy, who use their status and influence to shield themselves from accountability. Those who dared to speak out were often discredited, blacklisted, or simply erased from the industry. The machinery of fame could not only create stars, it could also hide the dark truths about those stars, as long as the right people were in charge. This culture wasn't new. R. Kelly, Jeffrey Epstein, and Harvey Weinstein are just a few of the names that have shone a light on the ugly side of power in entertainment and politics. All of them operated in a similar way. Abuse, coercion, and manipulation were not isolated actions, but part of a system that was enabled by those who turned a blind eye. The connections between these men and their enablers, lawyers, managers, business associates, formed a dangerous web that protected the perpetrators and kept victims in fear. In Diddy's case, what began as rumors about abuse and exploitation quickly evolved into allegations of a far more systematic pattern of behavior. Those who had worked with Diddy over the years, including several former employees and artists, began to speak out about the unspoken code of silence that protected the mogul. When the allegations against Diddy began to surface publicly, many observers couldn't help but draw parallels to other infamous figures in the entertainment and political worlds. The R. Kelly scandal, which involved the systematic abuse of young women and girls over decades, was perhaps the most striking comparison. Like Diddy, Kelly had built his career on being a beloved, almost untouchable figure, with a powerful network of allies and enablers that allowed him to continue his crimes with little consequence. Similarly, Jeffrey Epstein's criminal activities, which involved human trafficking, abuse, and the exploitation of young women, had been shielded by an array of high-profile friends in politics, business, and entertainment. The connections Epstein maintained through his wealth and power allowed him to evade justice for years, much like the way Diddy was able to maintain a pristine public image while allegedly engaging in criminal behavior behind closed doors. Harvey Weinstein, once a titan of the film industry, was also able to maintain his power for decades, using his position to coerce, abuse, and silence women who spoke out against him. Weinstein's downfall, after years of grooming, intimidation, and payoffs, finally exposed the dark side of Hollywood's ability to protect powerful figures. The Me Too movement, which gained momentum in the wake of Weinstein's exposure, revealed the widespread culture of silence in the entertainment industry, where those in power often manipulated situations to keep their secrets hidden. With Diddy, it seemed like a similar pattern was emerging. As more victims came forward with detailed accounts of abuse, sexual exploitation, and trafficking, it became clear that Diddy had relied on a network of powerful enablers who helped him evade scrutiny for years. But the question remained, how deep did this protection run? And who were the key figures that had helped him maintain his empire of fear and silence? One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was the realization that Diddy's alleged actions did not occur in isolation. A network of people, his inner circle, appeared to have helped him protect his empire, actively or passively. This circle included business associates, trusted friends, and even people who held influential positions in the entertainment industry. Several victims who came forward named individuals within Diddy's team who were complicit in the abuse, either by facilitating encounters or by turning a blind eye to what was happening behind closed doors. Some women described how they were introduced to Diddy by assistants or other artists who promised them the chance to advance in the music business, only for them to be manipulated and coerced into compromising situations. Diddy's associates were often described as a tight-knit group that fiercely protected him from any form of scrutiny. Several people within his management team were alleged to have been part of the operation, helping to arrange meetings, hide evidence, and control the narrative whenever allegations surfaced. There were even claims that victims were paid off, often with substantial sums of money, to keep their stories quiet. Some of Diddy's enablers had been with him for years, long before the allegations began to surface publicly. These were the people who knew the dark truth but chose to remain silent, benefiting from their association with a man who had the power to destroy careers and to create them. But Diddy's inner circle was not limited to his direct associates. He had cultivated relationships with some of the most powerful figures in the entertainment world, and even the political sphere. These connections gave him immunity, or at least the illusion of immunity, from ever having to face the full consequences of his actions. Many in Diddy's orbit were well-connected celebrities, some of whom were famous for their own questionable behaviors, but able to use their clout to help shield him from public scrutiny. Artists, producers, and even politicians who benefited from Diddy's empire were complicit in maintaining the silence that allowed the abuse to continue. One notable figure in Diddy's circle was Jay-Z, a longtime associate in the music business. Jay-Z had long been seen as a mentor and close ally to Diddy, and the two had worked on several joint ventures. While there's no indication that Jay-Z was directly involved in any of the alleged abuse, his proximity to Diddy raised questions about what he knew and whether he had done enough to distance himself from the mogul as these allegations surfaced. Another person of interest was Bill Clinton, who had long been famous for his ties to Hollywood and the entertainment industry. Clinton, like several other politicians, was a guest at Diddy's lavish parties, often seen rubbing elbows with celebrities and other powerful figures. While no formal connections between Clinton and Diddy's alleged abuse have been established, the public scrutiny over these high-profile associations raised troubling questions about the enablers who had helped shield Diddy from the consequences of his actions. As the legal case against Diddy continued to unfold, the culture of silence that had allowed him to escape justice for so long was beginning to crack. Victims were coming forward, and whistleblowers were breaking their silence. The entertainment industry was starting to face a reckoning, one where even the most powerful figures were being held accountable for their actions. But the question remained, would Diddy be the next to fall, or would the forces of money and influence continue to protect him? And who else, within his inner circle and beyond, would be implicated in his criminal empire? The culture of silence that had shielded so many powerful figures for so long was starting to break, and the world was watching closely as the truth began to unravel. As we draw to the close of this harrowing story, we find ourselves confronting the truth behind the glittering empire of Sean Diddy Combs, a figure who once embodied success, luxury, and influence in the music industry. Yet, as we've seen in this investigation, the reality behind his empire is one of allegations of abuse, exploitation, and even sex trafficking, crimes that have shaken the foundation of his public persona. From the first whispers of misconduct to the federal investigations and multiple lawsuits now filed by victims who bravely came forward, Diddy's story is one of secrecy, power, and manipulation, a story that mirrors the dark truths behind many high-profile figures in the entertainment world. We've explored the names of victims who have been harmed by his alleged actions, the system of enablers who helped protect him, and the connections to powerful figures that may have shielded him for years. But the question remains, will Diddy face the justice that many believe is long overdue, or will the power of money and influence continue to protect him? This case has not only revealed the darker side of Diddy's empire, but also highlights a larger, troubling pattern within the entertainment industry, a culture of silence that continues to protect the powerful and punish the vulnerable. But now, I turn to you. Yes, you. Do you believe these allegations will lead to a conviction? Will justice be served, or will the industry continue to shield figures like Diddy from the consequences of their actions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm eager to hear what you think about this case and whether you believe the truth will finally come to light. If you found this story insightful and thought-provoking, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update on this case or other true crime stories. Your support helps us continue to uncover the truth, and we're just getting started. Until then, thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next video.